Right, some 35 minutes past the top of the hour. Thank you for sticking around right here at TV47 Weekend from wherever this part of the country and even beyond you are watching us from. Now, this evening I want to get into the meat of the conversation on the Kenya and US bilateral ties. And earlier last week, that is if your Sunday is the first day of the week, last week President William Ruto visited the United States of America for the US-Africa Leaders Summit, and he had sideline events, which later on we had promises and all that. And definitely we will be getting some goodies, and it might be good news for Kenya. Will it be? Answering all that is Benson Serek, a policy analyst all the way from North Carolina. Benson, I believe it's a good afternoon there.
It is, yes, it is afternoon, Stanley. Good afternoon to your listeners in Kenya. It's afternoon here in Northern Carolina.
All right, thank you. And you can definitely chime into this conversation at TV47KE on Facebook and Twitter. Benson, in the visit by the president, what's your analysis of the whole visit and the whole sideline interviews and events, basically?
Thanks for having me, Stanley. First of all, I want to congratulate, I'm sure, Argentina because of what we just watched. Probably, arguably, one of the most interesting World Cup matches we have seen. I was rooting for France, but unfortunately, through the penalties, they were able to be routed out. But congratulations to Argentina, and obviously, this is probably one of the best games ever.
And I hope you've moved on.
Stanley, thanks. Yes, I have. I'm still recovering. It's just a few minutes ago, and hopefully I'll recover.
Okay.
Stanley, I want to appreciate you having me today. Our president was here last week, partially this week, actually. We are not over with the week yet. And he was here with other 47 presidents on a second visit to the U.S. on a U.S.-Africa summit for one of the things that Obama started in 2014. And today, when they left here, there are quite a number of things that I believe they were discussed. And we're yet to see the finals of what really was discussed, what did we gain. And I hope this will be a very great thing for Africa. That I've been telling people, we have been a giant continent with a lot of opportunities that are unexplored. And once the details comes out with the president's visit here, we will be able to see what exactly we are going to gain.
All right, definitely. I was actually getting to that, the fact that, well, as much as some of these promises might have been made, just to have some brief of them, basically Visa's pledge to, to support the recently launched Hustler Fund, also in the bag of goodies, entails Google's, to establish a product development center in Kenya and quite others. How significant is this for Kenya and even Kenyans living in the US?
Stanley, the Hustler Fund actually is something very great. It is similar to what Obama did here in 2008, 2007 post the Recovery Act, when the U.S. was having a lot of challenges economically. And Obama came up with a program called the Recovery Act. And actually, they were able to pump in a lot of money. For some of you that followed the news, when he took over, the U.S. was bleeding. They were losing a lot of jobs. And then come back again 2020. When Biden came to power, you guys saw what the devastation of the COVID was, and he started something through the Small Business Administration, a small type-based loan for small businesses starting from the bottom. And it actually helped a lot of businesses here, and actually U.S. is booming economically right now because of that. So in respect to what our president started, as far as Hustler is concerned, he did an amazing thing to introduce a financial system or something that can be able to help Kenyans at a lower level as we climb up the ladder. And I think there is a lot of reception by the Kenyans here. There are reception by also international community because they understand the economics. Most of you have been following the Biden administration also trying to make Americans to grow the economy from the bottom. And I think this was the correct call by the president on this one for the Hustler Fund.
All right. And you definitely talk about the development and the opportunities. Do Kenyans living in the U.S., for example, like you, do most of these Kenyans have most of the opportunities to actually invest in the U.S.?
Yes. One of the greatest things that I was also discussing with friends here is there are quite a number of opportunities here to invest here. But of course, everyone is trying to look on a way to contribute to the Kenyan economy, to invest in the Kenyan economy. The president met with a lot of Kenyans here. He was here also in February. He has a good framework for a lot of Kenyans to come and develop and bring these resources and capital to Kenya. You realize that U.S. contributes about over 60% of the money that is being remitted to Kenya. I mean, they are in terms of billions that normally come to Kenya every year. And I think what the president is doing is to tap that framework to see how we can be able to tap that money and the resources of the diasporans here to be able to invest in Kenya. As far as investing in the U.S., this is one of the easiest countries to invest in. You go to the secretaries of state, within a day, you can register a business in just one single page paper. And I hope this is something that we will discuss going forward about the bureaucratic steps that always exist on how it makes it challenging to start a business in Kenya. But I hope this is the beginning of the framework to see how there is an ease to do business in Kenya.
And we'll actually definitely talk about that, the obstacles of these relationships. Since 1964, U.S. has been establishing relations with Kenya, and there definitely has been obstacles. Now we'll definitely get to that. But then before that, basically, how significant was it for President William Ruto preside over the New York Stock Exchange and even ring that bell? And definitely, sure, and they would definitely have that particular video. How significant was it, even for Kenya to see him being there, New York Stock Exchange?
Very, very, very significant. You remember when President Ruto took over power, he started his journey with the Nairobi Stock Exchange. Most people do not know underworld of the stock exchanges on how they contribute to the economy. Remember, he's the only president actually out of the 47 that was here. He's the only one actually who was invited to go to the New York Stock Exchange. And this is extremely significant because, you are at the New York, the capital of the whole capital of the world in terms of finances. So that image itself presents Kenya as one of those very competitive places for business. You can imagine all the investors that were watching. You can imagine all the businesses that were thinking about setting up base in Kenya, whether it is technology, manufacturing, whether it is in terms of everything coming to Africa. And given that we are a very good country now, the way we transitioned well politically, the way we are booming in terms of good attractiveness to do business, that was extremely significant.
All right, definitely. Let's get into the obstacles, and we definitely actually saw that particular video of the president, even with the first lady, actually ringing that bell, and even for Kenyans, it was definitely a highlight moment for all his sideline interviews, events, basically. And President William Ruto also announced that his government will focus on growing capital markets by boosting investments through increased capital flows in order to create more job opportunities. But then at the end of the day, we always refer to as Mama Mboga and Baba Mboga and other people down grassroots levels, Kenyans. The obstacles that this will have, and obstacles which are basically there to cement these relationships.
There is no question that in any economic situation, there is no question that in any business there will be always an obstacle. You saw even the resistance when President was trying to launch or to move forward with the Asla Fund, which was not benefiting a section of Kenyans. It was benefiting all sections of Kenya. As far as this side is concerned, this is something that I also mentioned to a lot of friends, that US has a good potential. The market here is, the Chinese took advantage of the market capability here. The purchasing power in the United States is enormous, and we haven't penetrated any as much as we speak. So if you look at, as we wait for the agreements and everything that will come, the obstacle that I only see is a good follow-up. If we don't do a very, very incisive follow-up, there has been so many promises that the Western countries have done. I will give an example. For example, the climate change issue. There has been so many promises that are always done to some of these African countries, but no serious follow-up is done by the African leaders or even the county government whenever they come here. So if there is a very good follow-up, I can promise you that there's so much goodwill to develop Africa at the moment. There is so much goodwill to bring a lot of capital to Africa. US companies are looking an alternative of China, an alternative of Southern Asia to do their businesses. And Kenya is that place. So the only obstacle could be only us, the Kenyans, there in Kenya, if we don't allow that environment to create good, conducive business environment for these companies to come and invest.
Most definitely. And I'll quote what the president said during, I think, the second day of the US-Africa Leaders Summit. And, he told the global leaders and the private investors that the relationship between US and Africa, and in this case, Kenya, it should be a win-win kind of situation. What do you make of that? And even on that, what do Americans want at the end of the day in, this time?
Very good question. Very good question. Of course, nobody doesn't understand right now that Africa is resource rich. I mean, Africa has everything. You talk about oil, you talk about the metals, you talk about anything in terms of any resources that you need for manufacturing. So when we talk about the win-win, I mean, the president was talking about a major company that manufactures farming equipment, which is the John Deere. John Deere is the leading manufacturer of farm equipment. I mean, in retrospect, when you see, but Joe Biden himself also mentioned that Africa has 60% arable land that can feed probably the entire world. So in an event that American companies would come to invest in Africa, they will be able to produce food. They will be able to produce food that can be exported all to these American countries. I mean, there are companies which they own the capital and the equipment can also win because they will get significant purchases. You talk about manufacturing, US can bring basically everything to be manufactured in Africa, in Kenya, and they will also be benefiting from the cheap labor. They will be benefiting from the sale of the equipment, and Africans will develop because there will be jobs that will come with it.
All right, just let's talk about the Kenya-US free trade agreement. At this rate, I mean, this is something, it has been the backbone of both governments, even the previous governments. Remember, the former president of the US, Donald Trump, and former President Uhuru Kenyatta, they signed it. And so far, where does it stand? Who does it seek to benefit more, the US or Kenya?
I think both countries. I mean, both countries do benefit, but obviously, when you look at the situation where we are right now, it would be more beneficial to us Kenyans compared to the Americans, because they have always alternatives and they have always options. I mean, look at the agreement for AGOA, which is almost expiring, and I don't know whether that one was actually emphasized. That has been giving opportunity African companies, the textile African companies, to export stuff to this country, and you can see there are quite a number that are beginning. Ethiopia was that leading country that was almost at that level to manufacture so much clothing for the United States. So if the agreements actually go through, if the free trade areas are actually agreed upon so that the companies can come and invest, it will be much beneficial to the Africans, it will be much beneficial to Kenya for the development, and we will be able to move forward in terms of economic prosperity and development.
But at the end of the day, what does Kenya need to do to capitalize more on this agreement?
The first thing that they need to do is to remove regulations. I call it red tape. When you want to start a business in Kenya, you will have to approach using so many bureaucratic processes to do business in Kenya. That is one of the areas that I think it will be, if we don't remove it, and it will just be an agreement on paper and nothing will move on. The second thing is, of course, facilitating infrastructure and making fallouts. The Americans are very good at working with most of their companies and probably the development agencies. Kenyans and probably the Minister of Trade needs to engage more. It is not just a one-day visit like this week visit by the president. They need probably follow-up 3-4 times a year so that they be able to capture these things.
All right, definitely. And I want us to get into the airs and talk about, the airspace technology. And during his visit, the president was set to, make his pitch on the sale of, basically a sale of Kenya Airways. What do you think of this, basically? And he definitely had talked with private investors, even the government officials there. Is this the right move?
I didn't hear him probably he's talking about partnerships, but I don't think we will be able to sell our pride, the pride of Africa. I mean, if he's talking about partnership, obviously there is direct market here. We could have, I would see some people wanting maybe 2-3 flights coming to the US because of the potential to increase the traffic, whether it is the tourism, whether it is the business investments. I don't think he's talking about selling it to anybody, but I'll probably selling the partnership, just like the way Safaricom is doing some other partnerships across Africa for Kenya, for a Kenyan company like that. So I doubt if it's about selling the Kenya Airways, because I mean that is the pride of Kenya, and everyone is proud of Kenya Airways.
How significant do you think for Kenya Airways, definitely over the years has been experiencing its own challenges? How significant will this partnership be for Kenya?
Very significant. If you look at countries that have had direct flights to United States, look at Ethiopia, look at South Africa, look at Egypt. Those are people that have been able. Look at the rate at which Egypt is converting itself into an economic powerhouse right now.
Right, definitely think we have. Right, definitely think we have some network issues all the way from North Carolina up to Kenya. Definitely, I'll be told that we any feedback from our viewers and all that. Remember, we're talking about the whole Kenya-US ties and the whole bilateral ties. The president is, I believe, is still in the United States, still trying to have more promises and more strengthen basically these particular relationships between Kenya and US. Just to take you through some of this highlight of what since the president was there, he said that he'll boost investments in matters capital markets. Right, we do have you, Benson. I think the whole network all the way from North Carolina was a whole issue, but then we can definitely continue. You're talking about the whole significance of Kenya Airways, the partnership Kenya Airways and the US.
Sorry, somebody interrupted me. Yeah, there is not when they launched the direct flight from JFK to Nairobi, there was a lot of excitement, and there was quite a number of people that thought this could be the breakthrough that Kenya Airways really needed, especially to create traffic to generate income. There is no question the potential in accessing US market. Everyone is dying to access the US market. The Kenya is trying to get it. Every country. Most people even don't know that the Chinese themselves became superpower because of that access to the US market. Any more increased traffic to this country, any more increased direct flights, any more partnership that exists, what we have is going to be a net benefit for the country. And I believe this will be whether the president tries to champion for more flights to the United States or more partnership, that will be a net win situation for the country, because we will not only increase in traffic, business will be booming. Most of the software companies are trying to get their officials to be traveling to East Africa all the time. That is the partnership that we need, and I'm sure East Africa is going to benefit more than any other region because of that increased traffic. There is no lesser traffic that is not going to be much more beneficial than increasing the traffic to East Africa, and especially if we use our carrier Kenya Airways that will take them out of the debt situation. They should be able to do that.
Definitely, and during and while ongoing this particular ties and strengthening these ties, are we going to see more Kenyans living in abroad and in US like you invest more in Kenya?
There is quite a number of Kenyans who are investing. I'm an investor in Eldoret. I'm originally from Elgeyo Marakwet. I'm an investor in farms in Elgeyo Marakwet. I have done a lot of farm work. I have a lot of partnership with friends there. There are quite a number of Kenyans that are itching to come back and invest. The president can attest to that when he met us here in Washington, D.C. just in February and 2 days ago. So many Kenyans really want to come and contribute. And what they have been looking for is a pathway. They want a smooth transition. That is why we actually requested for the Ministry of Diaspora to be completely separate from the other ministries. If you look at the amount of money that it is coming, that could in itself generate a lot of capital inflow, a lot of influence in our regions, whether it is for some of us who love sports, we could come and invest in sports facilities in Elgeyo Marakwet. There's quite a number of things that can be done. And a lot of Kenyans that I talk to are excited about bringing investors. I have a friend who is interested in bringing textile investments to the Kerio Valley. There is quite a number of us who really want to contribute to that. And I hope the president, through his promises that he has made in February and just this week when he came, they will go through. I know it is still hardly part of the administration, and we are waiting for things to move through.
All right, and I want us to go back to the whole talks of the summit. And before we go to that, there's a particular feedback I've seen here on our SMSs. Someone asks, why was the US Africa Leaders Summit, held in US and not in Africa? Definitely Kenya, as part of Kenya, we also have a whole space to hold this. Why was it? And this was the second of its kind. But then why was it held in US?
Well, I think this was a culmination. I know this is the undertones that people speak. Every country is trying to compete for this resource-rich Africa. China has been doing the African-China partnership. Russia is also coming in place, and I'm sure US after 2014 was looking like, hey, if we don't jump into this resource-rich Africa, they could be left behind. I mean, there is no question about that. But then the question is, that is the question that all of us are asking. Was it feasible for just for the 9 presidents to travel here, or could it have been easy for Biden to travel to Africa? And he has promised to come to Africa next year, which we don't know whether he's going to meet them in one place or he's going to travel to different countries. That is a good question for the African Union. They need to sit down, they need to put their heads together and say, you know what, if America really needs our partnership, they need to come for it. We don't have to come here. I mean, it is easier for them to come here, but then it could be much easier for just one president to come to Africa and talk about these issues, plus the business community, just like the way Obama did in 2013, 2014. That could have been the case.
All right, and finally on the whole summit, there were definitely a lot of talks there, and even the side events that were held. Are these too many promises? But then at the end of the day, the Kenyans living here do not actually feel the impact of these promises.
I saw quite a number of the sideline meetings. One of them is with the technology industry, of which you can see the Google, the Oracles, they are coming to do some stuff in Africa. There is some to do with also even to the stock exchange. I'm sure there will be some agreements to strengthen the Nairobi Stock Exchange with the American New York Stock Exchange. There are quite some other meetings that happen, and I can repeat that if there is no follow-up in most of these American meetings, I've worked in the U.S. government before. I understand how they work. So if there is no clear follow-up, then we are just going to be the ordinary Mwananchi waiting for some good things to happen, but it doesn't happen because of follow-up. I remember some time back in the onset of the county government, quite a number of governors came here to sign partnership with states, because whatever we have as counties is almost similar with states, but they never made a follow-up. The only probably counties that did a follow-up back then was Gishu, when they had a partnership with Minnesota. They were able to get some equipment, they were able to get some fire trucks, ambulances. But if we don't do a follow-up in most of these things, I can tell you for a fact, it will never move forward. And this is where we are acting. I mean, as much as they come back home right now to celebrate Christmas, they should do immediate follow-up to this country, and then we will see a lot of results coming.
Right, Benson, I'll have your final words, even as US, you're preparing for the primaries. Your final words?
The primary is actually ended, and there is a transition right now. Mm-hmm. The Biden administration, and this is very important, the Biden administration now controls the Senate part of it. Okay. The Congress is controlled by the Republicans. So as much as we look into these policy issues and the ideas, we don't know whether Biden these 2 years is going to embrace really changing a lot of policy that is going to be beneficial to Africa. And once we know who will be the leader in the Congress, we obviously know that the Senate is okay. But as far as the Congress is concerned, and you remember CS Waziri, where Moses Kuria said we are waiting to see what the US will do. So after this, we will watch the agreements, and I can come back to give a feedback if things will have moved in terms of the policy and what the US will have done.
All right, most definitely, we'll definitely be waiting for all that, and how the politics of the United States of America and even in Kenya will be playing out. It will definitely play a big role and a vital role in the trade relations and even other relations between Kenya and the United States of America. Thank you very much, Benson Chiserek, a policy analyst all the way from North Carolina in the United States of America. And that's where we wrap up this particular